Every parent has experienced that moment of uncertainty when their child requests to go for a bike ride around the block, play in the front yard, or walk home alone. A simple choice made in the sleepy streets of Vallejo, California, in August 2000 started a series of events that made every parent in the country ask, do you feel secure in your neighborhood? Are you certain that your kids aren't being watched by a serial predator who lurks around the corner? Although worries about safety are legitimate, it's important to understand that being too cautious might impede a child's growth and feeling of autonomy. Giving kids some autonomy might help them become more resilient and self-assured, encouraging them to face the world with knowledge and caution rather than dread. Where every unsolved mystery holds secrets longing to be revealed, step into the shadows and discover them with hidden truths. These are not only hypothetical questions for a family in Vallejo, California. They are about to become reality. Midsi Sanchez, age 8, is the youngest of the family's 3 children. Born on August 12, 1992, Midsi has always been a vibrant, upbeat, courageous, and driven youngster. She was eager to get ready for school that day, since it was her 9th birthday, and she could already picture going home after school to start the actual celebration. Midsi was so excited on August 12, 2000, that she decided to go alone rather than wait for her brothers, whom she usually walked home with. She believed that going home would be simple because she knew the route, and the school was only a few blocks away from the Sanchez residence. Midsi left school at 4 p.m. with the intention of getting home before her brothers, certain that she would soon be able to see her birthday cake and open her presents. By this point, her family had almost finished preparing for the party and were waiting for the children to return, all expecting that it would be a joyous occasion, unaware that a terrible turn of events awaited Midsi. Midsi had gone about halfway home and was nearing the end of the street when she observed a stranger looking at her from a parked automobile. Midsi recalled that the man's chilly stare made her uneasy, but she dismissed it and went on her walk home. As a precaution, Midsi chose to cross the street away from the strange vehicle. Although her house was on the side she had been walking, she intuitively chose to avoid the stranger who was following her. As Midsi crossed the street, the man noticed she was going to leave, got out of his car, and called her over. The man pointed to his rear-view mirror and stated that he intended to fix it, but was having difficulty. He said that he damaged his leg while falling off his bike and couldn't bend down to get the tape between the seats in his automobile. The man behaved naturally, as if he couldn't do anything due to his injury. The guy smiled warmly and even walked a few steps, claiming to be in agony and leaning against the car to be more convincing. He succeeded in misleading Midsi. The girl felt pity for the man and offered to help. They approached the automobile from the passenger side, with the driver's door still closed. At this time, the man guided Midsi to the gap between the seats, but when she stooped down to check for the thing, he shoved her inside the car and locked the door. When Midsi realized she was in the automobile, she screamed and attempted to open every door, but they were all obstructed. Clearly, the offender had planned for this scenario. The man abruptly stopped pretending to be injured, leaped into the driver's seat, and drove away. The perpetrator chose an ideal time for the kidnapping, with no people or vehicles around. That area is currently quite empty. Meanwhile, Midsi's 2 older brothers had left school, as their classes had also ended. The boy waited for his sister, but she was not there. Later, he was informed that she had left, so he went home. The boy thought that Midsi had hurried home to start the party as soon as possible. He hurriedly followed behind, so as not to be late. You were shocked when your sister wasn't at home with everyone. Everyone is waiting for the little girl and starting to worry. When the boys came home without Midsi, everyone began to suspect that something was wrong. The family began to wonder where Midsi could have disappeared to and what had happened to the girl on her birthday. Meanwhile, Midsi is in the car with the perpetrator. The girl was in the back seat, crying and screaming, begging the man to stop and let her go, but he just ignored her tears. Instead, the man used a lock and chain to bind his victim in the car. The stranger drove to the parking lot of a secluded shopping center where there were no cars or passersby. He drove into a dead-end alley where no one could see, then handed Midsi a paper bag containing clothes and asked her to change. She didn't argue because she didn't want to anger the criminal. After changing clothes, Midsi folded all the clothes into a bag, and the kidnapper threw it into the nearest trash can. Then, the man pulled out a gun and said that if Midsi tried to escape, she would die. The perpetrator then took out a bottle of water, poured a glass for Midsi, and forced her to drink. The liquid was very bitter, but she had no other choice and had to comply. It turned out to be strong liquor. After a while, the girl began to feel dizzy from what she had drunk, but the man forced her to drink another glass, after which she passed out. Clearly, the perpetrator did this to make their victim dizzy and unable to escape. The stranger then drove to a more secluded location where there was an abandoned and completely deserted house. The perpetrator tied Midsi to the door, took photos, and raped the girl multiple times. The man left her there, got into his car, and drove away. A few hours later, Midsi woke up in complete darkness. Her head throbbed from the strong alcohol the perpetrator had forced her to drink. Midsi didn't understand where she was, but she realized the situation was very serious. The girl wondered if her family was looking for her, and if they knew what was happening to her. Midsi understood that the chance of being found in this position was very slim. Of course, her loved ones have no idea what has happened to her. At this point, everyone in the Sanchez household was confused and scared. The little girl has been missing for hours, and no one can understand where Midsi has gone. Her parents called all her friends, but no one knows where she is. They could only track Midsi until she left school around 4 o'clock, but there is no further information about her after that. No one went with her, saw where she went, or talked to her. The family called the parents of all of Midsi's classmates, hoping that she had gone to someone's house to play and lost track of time, but no one knew where she was. Later, the Sanchez family decided to contact the police and report Midsi's disappearance. Law enforcement officers immediately took notice of this case because it involved an 8-year-old child who could not have left on their own and might be in danger. But there is another reason why the police are concerned about this case. In fact, during the same period, there were 2 similar incidents involving missing young girls. Therefore, the police believe they are dealing with a kidnapper, rapist, or even a serial killer. Previous incidents did not receive widespread publicity. However, the local residents were well aware of what was happening. Many people fell into a panic, which only intensified when the rumors reached the Sanchez family. All the children disappeared near each other in the same area. One of the girls lived just 2 blocks away from Midsi's house. The first victim, 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, disappeared in a similar manner near her home under unclear circumstances. Amber was kidnapped in broad daylight while playing in her parents' yard, right before their eyes. No one knows what happened to her, and the search efforts yielded no results. The next victim was 7-year-old Shaw Fairchild. The girl disappeared as if into thin air. There were no witnesses. No one saw what happened when she disappeared near her home. The police are having a headache, realizing that the kidnapper must have used a vehicle to carry out the abduction quickly and escape without being detected. Unfortunately, they cannot track him accurately. When the investigation into Midsi's disappearance began, it seemed they were dealing with a serial offender, and his list of crimes could be much more extensive. Shaw and Amber disappeared with a short time between them. The last victim disappeared 8 months before these events. With the time that has passed, they no longer hope to find the girls alive. All the families of the missing people do not give up. All the victims lived in Vallejo. It will be impossible to contain public anxiety, so the police need specific information. Of course, first and foremost, it is essential to stop the crime spree and understand what is happening to the victims. Unfortunately, Midsi Sanchez's case is similar to previous ones, including the worst aspects, such as the complete absence of any clues. The only things the police know are the direction she left the school and the time. Unfortunately, this is a sparsely populated street in the city, and during working hours, a child could really pass through unnoticed until they get home. The detectives checked everything and spoke to any potential witnesses living along the street, but no one could provide useful information. With the geography of the cases, the police believe that the kidnapper also lives in Vallejo. This explains why he could hide without being detected. The serial offender probably knows these streets well, has the ability to navigate accurately in time and space, which is why he can leave without being noticed. Moreover, his presence on these streets is not unusual for those around, so he might not attract attention. During this time, Midsi's relatives have been actively searching for her throughout the city. Many volunteer groups have been formed, including many people concerned about the kidnapping. All of them have distributed and posted flyers with the family's images and contact information. They acted within the first few hours after this work began. The owner of a nearby junkyard contacted the police station, where he found a blanket completely soaked in blood. Unfortunately, it was not possible to identify the owner of the blanket, but the DNA on the blanket did not match Midsi. In the following days, the perpetrator moved around the city with his young victim, even going beyond the limits. The man stopped at various places and did whatever he wanted. Many times, he parked right in the city center, and it was later discovered that even the patrol cars were near the stranger without any suspicion. Midsi had been in the car the whole time, but she was so terrified of the kidnapper that she didn't dare signal or call for help. Midsi was horrified, almost paralyzed, and did not resist. She was almost always inside the car, so Midsi simply couldn't reach out to others, even if she had the strength to do so. At some point, it seemed like she had accepted her fate and was just waiting to see what would happen next. During this time, the perpetrator drove around the bay, constantly moving, changing the locations where he stopped the car. This allows him to avoid attracting attention and raising suspicion. Under favorable conditions, a person can hide in this way right under the police's noses for a long time. The longest stops he made during these days were overnight stays outside the city. To do this, he used secluded places. Additionally, the perpetrator would go out to eat while never offering the victim a sip of water, although he continued to make her drink alcohol. Midsi was clearly weakening from hunger and thirst. It seems that the kidnapper is deliberately leaving Midsi hungry and thirsty, relishing her slow and painful death. Midsi had not eaten or drunk any water for 2 days while being held captive. During one stop, Midsi gathered her courage and asked the kidnapper, "Where are we going?" He said he was going to watch the news, wanting to see Midsi's mother cry in a report about her daughter's disappearance. It was painful for Midsi to hear this. At this moment, the man once again stopped with his victim in the city, actually got out of the car and approached a nearby cafe where there was a television. The stranger asked them to turn on the news channel, and as he expected, the Sanchez family's relatives were speaking at that moment. Midsi's mother was in tears, calling on everyone to help in the search, providing any information that could help save her daughter. The kidnapper is savoring the desperate tears of the mother. When he returned to the car, he showed Midsi a flyer with her picture on it. He boasted that he had taken it himself, telling the volunteer distributing the flyers that he would actively participate in the search activities. He is deliberately mocking everyone and enjoying it. On the second morning after the kidnapping, he made another long stop. This time, the stranger left her in the car under the blazing sun for hours. This is August in California, so the inside of the car is like a furnace. Tired and thirsty, Midsi is enduring the thirst and the heat. The perpetrator left a large gap in the window, and she could see through it. The victim saw people passing by, but she was too afraid of the kidnapper to call for help, only crying out of helplessness. It's hard to imagine how exhausted Midsi was at the end of this hot day without water. Midsi recalled the moment she talked to her uncle when he said that if you don't apologize, you will go to hell. Midsi thought she had lost all hope and decided to pray. She apologized to all the family members. By evening, the kidnapper finally returned and drove to the industrial area near the city. This is another desolate place that the perpetrator visited with his victim. He parked here and got out, walking to a secluded store to shop. Midsi remained in the car, paralyzed with fear. But at that moment, she realized something important. The kidnapper had left a set of keys on the seat, and among them, a smaller key than the others caught her attention. Midsi realized that this key could unlock the one she was tied to. Suddenly, the fear that had paralyzed her for 2 days was replaced by a desperate desire to save herself. Midsi grabbed the set of keys, instinctively trying the small key in her lock, and to her surprise, it worked. She freed herself and immediately climbed over the seat. The car door was locked, but she tried to open the window a bit and started to squeeze through the gap. As soon as she got outside, the kidnapper returned with his goods. He saw that the situation had spiraled out of control and shouted for the victim to return to the car, but there was no way for the victim to go back. Instead of returning to the car, Midsi ran down the road with all her might. The criminal, an adult man, easily caught up with the frail child. The street was deserted, seemingly with no chance of escape. Suddenly, a truck started turning onto this road. Fortunately, it turned towards Midsi and immediately became alert. Midsi ran right in front of the car, almost getting run over by the wheels. When the car stopped, Midsi, with all the speed and agility she could muster, climbed up and slipped through the window, hiding inside the car. All of this is happening in a deserted industrial area, and while fleeing from the stranger, Midsi was ready to hide anywhere, even climbing into another stranger's car. This shows a lot. Midsi introduced herself and explained that she had been kidnapped. The driver immediately decided to take action and protect her. The kidnapper, who had almost caught up with his victim, looked in horror at the rescuer, then ran back to his car, got into the driver's seat, and tried to escape. However, he didn't do it fast enough. The driver managed to record the license plate number and clearly see the face of the kidnapper. The young man saw that the child was very tired, gave Midsi some water, and immediately contacted the police. This call was a true miracle, as up to this point, the authorities had no leads whatsoever. They don't know where to search for the little girl. Now, with a clear description of the perpetrator, the vehicle, and the license plate number, the police took only a few hours to apprehend him. Midsi was finally reunited with her family. The kidnapper turned out to be Curtis Dean Anderson, 43 years old. When they showed Midsi his photo, she recognized the man who had tortured her and cried. Midsi asked many times whether he had been arrested by the police to ensure that she was safe and no longer threatened. Midsi's miraculous rescue and her story have become a phenomenon. Not only did her parents and relatives come to welcome her, but also dozens of concerned citizens, including those who actively participated in the search and rescue operations as volunteers. The house was filled with reporters rushing to break the news. Meanwhile, Curtis Anderson was in the interrogation room, and he was no stranger to the police, having been arrested by the authorities multiple times before. However, each time it was a less serious offense compared to kidnapping and assaulting an 8-year-old child. Before being kidnapped, Curtis was involved in thefts and robberies. At least that is what is known about his other activities, as he was only arrested for lesser offenses. Because of that, this man was familiar to the police and had served a short prison sentence, but due to good behavior, he was released early. According to detailed information, Curtis killed 13 children. It was never possible to reliably identify all these victims, as he did not disclose their names or the locations of their bodies. It seems that the perpetrator is just taunting the police and enjoying the confusion he creates in the process. Curtis did not provide any details about the other crimes. To date, it remains unclear whether this is the truth or the product of a disturbed mind. In January 2001, Shay's body was actually found in the Santa Cruz Mountains. She had been attacked, severely emaciated, and likely died from an overdose of illegal substances that Curtis had injected and tested on her. Preventing the kidnapper was a true miracle. Now the police want to find out if he could be involved in the abductions of other girls, including Shah and Amber. It is not ruled out that he could be responsible for dozens of child disappearances in neighboring cities and even other states. Initially, the detained individual did not want to cooperate with the investigation, but gradually, the man confessed to the abduction of Midsi. They were able to get him to confess within 2 days. Curtis confessed that he had actually kidnapped Shah and even pointed out on the map where her body was buried. The perpetrator also confessed to abducting Amber, but could not pinpoint the exact location of her body on the map. The perpetrator recorded the torture and assault of the girl on video. She could have died and been buried before Midsi was kidnapped. It turns out that the killer would kill one victim and immediately start looking for a new one. If it weren't for the heroic actions of Midsi, who escaped, he could have continued his bloody journey across the neighborhoods, and the number of victims could have increased. Amber's body was never found. In the trial, Midsi was present in the courtroom just a few meters away from her tormentor. She recounted in detail what had happened to her over the more than 2 horrific days. It's hard to imagine that an 8-year-old child could endure this. Her loved ones are filled with pride for Midsi, unaware that her battle is just beginning. At the hearings, she brought her stuffed bear, which helped her cope with her fear. The girl answered all the questions in a resolute and confident voice, recounting her horrifying story. Curtis could not be convicted of killing Shah and Amber based solely on his confession, so an investigation was conducted. Witnesses were found who saw Curtis talking to Shah at a gas station in Vallejo on the morning of December 9, 1999, before she disappeared. Others claimed they saw Curtis talking to her on the street a few days before she was kidnapped. They could not charge Curtis with Amber's death due to the lack of a body and any evidence. However, the jury found Curtis Anderson guilty of kidnapping Midsi and murdering Shah, and he was sentenced to death. Curtis died of renal failure on death row in 2009. Unfortunately for the victim of this tragedy, who was fortunate to escape a painful death, the problems only began after the trial. Midsi became a victim of bullying at school. It all started with simple curiosity, with people feeling like they could approach and ask Midsi about the traumatic experience she had endured. Naturally, talking about this with people is not easy, but the pressure is unavoidable. The situation worsened when malicious children said they were glad this happened to her and that she deserved to be a victim of the kidnapping. Other children said that they shouldn't have survived. Many children say they enjoy the attention they receive because of what happened. It seems that no one cares about the feelings of an 8-year-old child after experiencing a trauma that not even adults can endure. Her parents tried to support their daughter as much as they could, but this was not easy under such circumstances. The situation led to severe post-traumatic stress disorder, which was only worsened by the behavior of those around her. Every day at school became a hell, and Midsi was forced to see a psychologist to find ways to cope with the stress. Unfortunately, this did not help at all. By the age of 14, she had stopped therapy, started having suicidal thoughts, dropped out of school, and began using alcohol and illegal substances to numb the pain. By the age of 15, she was constantly running away from home, befriending bad company, and could be absent from home for several days. Later, there were rumors that Midsi had become a member of a local gang, which she later admitted. According to unverified reports, she may have been involved in some robberies. Midsi admitted that fights are a frequent occurrence in her life. In 2009, when Midsi turned 16, she was sitting in a car with a drunk friend. The young man lost control of the car and collided with another vehicle. He had fastened his seatbelt, which helped him avoid serious injuries. However, the passenger did not wear a seatbelt and was thrown through the windshield onto the road at a speed of about 62 miles per hour. The traffic accident was so severe that Midsi fell into a coma for 2 weeks. She sustained a large number of injuries, including broken bones. The doctors had to reconstruct her. However, fate was once again kind to her. Midsi survived, but the most interesting thing happened when the doctors discovered that she was pregnant. It turns out she is going to have a baby girl. This became a turning point for Midsi. She decided to rearrange her life. Midsi started working on self-improvement, going through detox, resuming therapy, and deciding to focus on keeping the baby and giving it a better life. Midsi admitted that she saw a reflection of herself in this unborn girl. From that moment, Midsi understood that she wanted to end her reckless lifestyle and finally face all the burdens that had accumulated. the young mother was determined that nothing similar would happen to her daughter. Mitsi's journey is a powerful testament to the resilience and impact one person can have on their community. After the life-changing experience of becoming a mother, she was deeply affected by the news of a missing girl who looked just like her own child. This motivated her to take action, proving that personal experiences can ignite a passion for struggle. By distributing flyers and connecting with the family of the kidnapped girl, Midsi not only provided support, but also raised awareness about the issue of child abduction. Deciding to volunteer for a charity that specializes in helping victims and their families shows her commitment to making a difference. Establishing her own charity has amplified her efforts, allowing her to reach even more individuals in need. Mitsi's story is not just about overcoming personal trauma. It is also about turning that pain into motivation for good. Her work may have saved many lives and brought hope to many families. If you find Mitsi's story inspiring, consider supporting similar initiatives or sharing her message to raise awareness about child safety and the importance of community involvement. Every effort is valuable in the fight against abduction and in creating a safer environment for children. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this story and want to dive deeper into more intriguing mysteries, be sure to subscribe to Hidden Truths and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.